Hello. I think everybody's here. I mean, hopefully everybody's here, I'm assuming. I guess questions should start. Actually, before I start questions, I'm Natalie Lakosil. I'm an agent at Bradford Literary Agency. I'm coming up on my 10 years as an agent this September. I represent a very broad range of children's literature, adult literature, and nonfiction as well. So hopefully I can answer a lot of different questions. All right, let's go. Question. Okay. How should I approach querying a book with a co-author? Okay, so I mean, the regular way of querying, there really isn't a different way of querying with a co-author unless one of you has representation and the other doesn't. If one has representation and the other doesn't, obviously approach the author who has representation's agent and let them know about the project. If neither of you have representation, just you guys can divide and conquer, sending out query letters with both of your bios. And you should probably also mention if you are open to an agent who might be representing one of you and maybe not both, because I think what could get tricky in that case is if the agent loves that project, they're going to want to see, to consider representation for both of you, they're going to want to see, hopefully they should be asking to see individual work from both of you if they're going to represent individually you or not. So specify if you're also looking individually for agents. Okay. Do I prefer literary or commercial middle grade voice? It's a great question. I like both a lot. I'd say I'm pretty much looking a lot for more literary right now than commercial, but I'm drawn to commercial hooks. So in voice, I tend to like very literary. There you go. In voice, I tend to like more literary with very strong high concept hooks, which is basically traditionally what is referred to as upmarket. Anything in particular I'm looking for right now in middle grade? Not really. I'm looking for some great contemporaries. I think anything with light touches of magic. I already have a couple of great fantasies on my list, so it would have to be really above and beyond for a fantasy middle grade to stand out to me. Yeah, not looking for potty humor. Please discuss the chapter book market. Okay. Let's see, threw that right out there. All right, what do you want to know? I don't know what to talk about it. There are different levels of chapter books. There are leveled readers, which could be considered part of the chapter book market, which are traditionally work for hire kinds of projects. And they're in the younger, lowest. There's younger chapter books. Maybe comps would be like Baby Mouse would be a great young chapter book comp. I think is it Unicorn and Narwhal? Then there are older chapter books, the more traditional space, which is, gosh, I would say like your Captain Underpants, your Magic Treehouse, all of those successful series. Chapter books are tough to break out because they are very small, and you think about shelf space. When you're looking at a shelf, you've only got, you've got all of these tiny, tiny little books, and so discovering a new author when it's not already an established series can be really difficult, which is why they usually will launch several at once. A lot of them have a big push in the school library market. I don't know if the question is there a market for chapter books? There is. I think it just has to be really special. It has to have a really strong series, high concept, and a really strong character to carry that series. Okay, question 4. I tend to notice more YA romances centered around girls accepting and loving boys with physical differences, but not much the other way around, meaning a reverse Beauty and the Beast. I actually saw a deal, I feel like, recently for a reverse Beauty and the Beast, which I thought was intriguing. I missed the very end of that question and what was about it, and if it was, why is that? I mean, I think that it's just been, Well, to be perfectly honest, probably because we rely so much on traditional storytelling that a lot of people have been thinking in the traditional veins. But right now, what's exciting people the most are breaking out of those traditional veins, particularly when it comes to breaking the ways representation has to date been done. So I think that if you're looking to think out of the box and you know, come to the table with a fresh take on it, that would be great. Okay, is there ever a time when an agent would say okay to a prologue? So possibly. I am personally anti-prologue, and the reason for that is because often I find that writers use them as crutches more so than something necessary to a story, meaning a writer will pick a scene from later in the novel perhaps and put it in the beginning because they don't think their first chapter is gripping enough. Okay, that's the wrong reason to use a prologue. That means that you need to work on your first chapter. Maybe you're not starting the book in the right place. Or a writer will think, oh, they're never going to understand my world if I don't include this huge world building chapter. Also a wrong reason to use a prologue. That means that you haven't done your world building accurately, okay? A reader should be able to come along with you and understand how the world operates through reading the text without needing a big info dump explanation. And sometimes a prologue will be given as like a teaser, like, oh, I just really want to show this other perspective, maybe an adult perspective. And, you know, I would say, again, kind of a crutch, you know, are you doing it just because you personally love it? Is it really necessary to the arc of the story, to your protagonist, who is the star of the story? So I think that the times when a prologue would be accepted is if it wasn't very clearly being used for a purpose that avoids doing the work needed in other areas. Any thoughts on the YA market right now? What publishers are looking for and also what they don't want? I think what publishers are looking for right now is anything new, fresh, surprising. I think definitely surprising is a keyword. I don't think that right now there's a specific need. I've heard a lot of different things thrown out. Some editors are like, I think horror is going to be having a moment. And others are like, I can't stand horror. I don't see how that's ever going to work in the market. And you're like, okay, whatever. But, you know, I think trying to predict trends is never the way to go. I think that right now there's so much YA that they're really looking for new voices. They are looking for new voices, but they're looking for traditionally non-represented new voices. You know, I think we've all recognized that the children's book industry needs more diversity, not just in the books that are put out, but the books, the authors who write the books. So I think that's a huge push right now, is to make sure that we're all considering and actively looking for those stories. I think what people are not looking for are are narratives told from marginalized perspectives by non-marginalized perspectives. I think people are not looking for I think there's a lot of fantasy fatigue, to be perfectly honest, in the YA market right now, meaning the traditional sword and queen and kind of that medieval kind of type revenge fantasy. But, you know, I still see some of them selling, so I'm not going to draw a line in the sand and say anything won't work. I think it just has to be really, really compelling. If I'm querying a YA fantasy and my only published work is a nonfiction picture book, do you mention it in the bio or leave it off? Mention it, absolutely mention it. Here's why. Do you plan to write more nonfiction picture books? If you do, you're gonna want your agent to be aware of that. And you're probably gonna want an agent who can also handle those nonfiction picture books. Plus, any writing credits should go in the bio, because anytime you've worked with a publisher, no matter how big or small, it's giving you experience that it's good to know you have. What makes for a satisfying ending to a picture book? I think it depends on the type of picture book. If it's an I love you book, I think something that makes you feel warm and safe and loved is ideal. I think that if it's a good night picture book, something that's soft, quiet, that allows you to kind of shut the page, maybe even on a whisper. I think if it's a funny, just fun picture book, I think surprise is good. I think surprise is good at any time. And I love coming full circle, meaning I love endings that connect back to the beginning in some way. You know, some way that shows the full narrative arc and perhaps what growth has occurred for the character in the story along the way. What does my ideal query letter look like? How is it structured? Does it include comps? My ideal query letter is told entirely through cat gifs, and your comps must also be told through cat gifs. I'm joking, but actually kind of not. That'd be hilarious. No, but really, just brief intro, a little bit about the book, you know, maybe like a paragraph or two that's the description, and then a paragraph bio about the author. And then, yes, I love book comps. However, what I love more than book comps are the why you've chosen those book comps, meaning if you can say, oh, you know, you readers will like this because of the lyrical quality reminiscent of X meets the surprising and tear-jerk learning lessons of X, meaning because I'm not always going to have read your comps, but I want to know that what you're thinking of and what kind of a book, why it fits in the market it does. What is advice for more quiet, literary, character-driven books? And is there a market for more quiet, literary YA sci-fi? So yes, absolutely, there's a market. I think that for more character-driven YA or sci-fi, I should say, was the question. I would say sometimes I have seen people make the mistake of just describing literary books as quiet when it doesn't have not just enough hook, but emotional pull. I would say I have read some very traditionally quiet books that scream with emotion, with character growth and build. So I think that a quiet book can be really, a literary book can be really powerful in what it brings to the reader. So I think, first of all, you should probably think about if maybe you're not offering as much of a punch as you can. And I think that that's kind of where the market lies. I think that if you're not offering sort of that connection to that character in that other loud kind of way, and doesn't have a super unique, compelling premise, what is the reader kind of in there for? You know, just to read about the life of some guy. So I think if you don't have, I mean, always try and think about what makes yours unique, though. I mean, it's a tough market, period, to stand out. So if you're thinking, I don't really have a hook, I would consider, what is your hook then? You know, what is it that the reader is taking away? Like, is it that emotional connection that is meant to be the hook of your book? Okay, so as a Muslim woman of color who doesn't identify as LGBTQIA, who is writing a Muslim book with a female-female romance, is that problematic? I would say yes. Right now, it would be. I know that's a tough question to ask, and I'll just give you guys my blanket answer right now as to why, at least from my perspective, it is. And that's because I wouldn't know how to properly vet that novel. I'm not queer, so I identify as straight. So for me, I would not accurately be able to tell you if you have done the work to accurately portray that relationship. I mean, obviously, it's love is love, and there's no getting around that. But there are, because of the world we live in, there are different societal influences. For example, there are different thoughts and emotions. And heck, I've never done heavy petting with a girl, so I mean, I don't know. So I've read them, and certainly I am not opposed to reading them at all. I love them, but I I don't like to take on projects by an author who is not directly coming from a place of experience, because I don't know if what they are putting on the page is authentic. And while, yes, you can get sensitivity reads, you can get lots of different reads on your book, everyone's experience is unique. There is not going to be just one way to tell a female-female love romance story. And so, you know, that is saying that when you're writing it as someone who has experienced it, you're writing it from your experience, which is a authentic experience. Creating one might be a conglomeration of a bunch of different ones, but I just wouldn't know. And I don't want to be an active participant in putting anything out there that could potentially harm or hurt readers. Who are your top 3 picture book characters and why? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, I don't know that I could pick a top 3 picture book characters. This is just, you guys should know in general, I don't do favorites. I have a really hard time pinning down favorites. So I'll just list some books that I'm really loving right now. I'm reading my son a book called Neck and Neck, which is a hilarious riot. It's a really, really fun read aloud. And I think what I love the most about it is it's surprising and it goes a little bit dark. There's basically a moment where the main character can decide, do I do the right thing? Do I not do the right thing? And he decides not do the right thing. And you're like, yeah. I mean, he learns his lesson in the end, but it's very, very fun. I've also, reading right now and really loving, well, I have been loving Penguin Problems, which is not a more recent book, but it's just another really fun and quirky kind of book about a penguin who hates his life, but of course learns to appreciate his life. I like the sparse text of it. I like punchy, short humor. Oh, there's another book that my son has super loved, which is actually one of my client books, everybody's favorite book. That book is supposed to be, as the title you can tell, is supposed to be everybody's favorite book. But it's actually the main character keeps pulling in more and 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 more, and it just gets super outrageous until you're like, oh my God. So kind of saying that there is no pleasing everybody, but it's a really, really fun read aloud. So basically, I'm liking a lot of books that my 3-year-old is liking right now. You know, that said, I have a little 11-month-old as well, and I'm loving reading him some I Love You, Sweet Goodnight books. So that was not your question, but there you go. Really long answer of what kind of picture books I like. I consider myself a new adult writer. Is there any hope for college-based or college-age stories, whether contemporary or science fiction fantasy? This is a great question. I just had this discussion with a class that I'm teaching right now. So basically, I think that when it comes to the new adult market, it's still relatively new, even though it feels like it's not. It is in the grand scheme of publishing. And a big reason it never really took off was because there was no shelf space for it. You know, when you're thinking about print books, you know, the publisher is relying very heavily still on bookstores for discoverability of new authors. And so when there's nowhere to put a book, it kind of gets lost, and you know, they were kind of shelved a lot of times in the contemporary romance section or just in the romance section because of the more mature content. But I think that, is that going to change? Will that change? I think it could. I think that that's where self-publishing came in. It showed that it's not that there wasn't a need or a want for these kinds of books. On the contrary, a lot of people gravitated to them. There just wasn't a space for them to go and discover them until self-publishing opened that door, and it got a lot of new adult into the hands of readers, which is why in new adult right now, primarily there is still space for it, but it's digital. So I think we'd have to see a shift in bookstore, you know, the way things are kind of shelved, and if there is a dedicated space to them to really see a big print shift. But right now there isn't one. Okay, how high is too high in fantasy and sci-fi? Great question. So let me just quickly go down through might as well go through the whole list of kind of what I consider the sweet spots for word count of every genre right now. So picture book, your fiction picture book, you're wanting to be less than 500 words. Nonfiction picture book, less than 1,200 words, including back matter. Chapter book, less than 10,000 words, more like the 7,500 to 10,000 is more of the sweet space in chapter book. Middle grade, between 30 to 60,000 words. The higher end is going to be for your more fantasy based, and the lower end is going to usually be for your more contemporaries. YA, I would say 80 to 100,000 words. I think 70 and 80 is more the sweet spot for YA. And then, of course, with YA as well, the high end is going to be the fantasies and the low end is going to be the contemporaries. And then going into like adult market sci-fi, you can go up, those go up to like, I think 120,000 words. I would say if you're doing a YA and I see it's over 100,000 words, if it's over like 120,000 words, that's probably an automatic reject for me. If it's a contemporary and it's over 120,000 words, oh yes, I probably won't even take a look at that because good Lord, what do you have in your contemporary? That's 2 books. But other than that, I try and keep an open mind if it's at least within that range. If it's over 150,000 in any kind of word genre, no way, Jose. What trends could be on decline? Which are rising? And is it possible to query books in genre or trends that might be dead but have a manuscript that has a unique quality to it? Yes, I have heard from a lot of different editors actually that traditional tropes or concepts that we consider dead, if they star a perspective that we haven't already seen in that, are of high interest because we need those books. We need those stories told from those points of views as well. But I think that other than that, I think that probably I feel like urban fantasy dystopian is making a slight comeback. Still challenging, really challenging though. Fantasy is more on the decline, not because it's not of interest, but I think that a lot of editors who love fantasy already have 1 or 2 authors that they're already working with, and so they're not actively looking for that right now. Otherwise, I refuse to try and predict anything because it could change in a heartbeat. When you consider representing a particular author, what's your next step? What kind of research do you do? What questions do you hope to answer? When I'm considering representing an author, I Google them. First thing I do, I Google them. I see where they are online. If they're nowhere online, that's super unhelpful, and I just kind of have to like get on a phone call with them and hope they're not a complete weirdo. If there is, if I'm usually when I'm Googling, it's not going to be the end all unless I see something that completely turns me off. Like if this person is bashing other writers, agents, editors, being super negative online, involved with a cult, I don't know. Then no, I'm probably not going to move forward with that person. But the next step from there, I'm usually going to reach out to them and say, hey, can you share, if it's a picture book author, I'm going to ask them to share more work. I'm going to ask them to send me 2 or 3 more manuscripts because I need to know that aside from the one that I love, I'm going to love a picture book author's body of work, that there's going to be at least 3 manuscripts. I feel like, okay, I feel like I can sell this. I can go out with this. I love this idea because with picture books, I know you guys are so prolific and I want to make sure I'm going to like the body of what you do instead of just one project. With a novel, I'm going to get on a phone call after the Google and I'm going to talk about what else are you doing? What else are you writing? I'm going to see, do we click on the phone? Do our visions align? I'm going to talk about what kind of edits that I have in mind for your project and make sure, like, does that sound agreeable to you? Do our like simpatico right now or not? And then usually yeah, and then that's kind of it. Do you have any tips regarding villains, especially about how to get their motive and characteristics across without monologuing? Oh, ugh, okay. Hmm. Motives and characteristics across without monologuing. I mean, that would probably fall into the slow reveal of motive, complex motive, meaning instead of having that one big monologue where they reveal their big life story, you know, are there little things that your character finds out about the villain along the way that add depth and context to what they're doing? You know, so that by the time you get to the final scene, you're like, you understand multiple layers going into this full story. I think that, yeah, that's my best tip, I guess. What should a bio of a query consist of? It should be like basically your name and where you live. Do you have pets or children, child pets? I don't know, husband, whatever. A couple of hobbies you might enjoy doing if you're active in any kidlit communities or other writing communities. Meaning like a author bio might be Susie Jones is a writer living in New Jersey with her husband and 3 cat children. She often likes long walks in the woods when she's not typing up her manuscripts. Visit her online at and where her website, and that's kind of it. What are the most important words of advice you can give to aspiring picture book authors in today's market? Actually, something I just read from a client's interview. Sorry, Gabby, I'm stealing your words. Which is, don't keep revising the same stories. Keep writing new picture books. I think that the 12 by 12 challenge is a great way to sort of force yourself to keep moving. I think that you can't get stuck up on every idea too, though. I think know that as a picture book author, if you write 12 books a year, you can hope to sell maybe 1 or 2. So don't expect everything you write to sell, but keep being prolific and using what you've learned to keep it growing on your ideas. And if you get feedback, if you really like an idea, maybe the execution isn't there. One of my favorite stories was an author who queried me with a project very early on, and I loved this concept, one key concept of it, but I didn't love the execution. She took the idea and she revamped it into a whole different story. And I loved that one. So I think that sometimes it's not necessarily that the idea you have isn't a good one. You just may not have found the best way to tell it yet and the most surprising and unique execution. If a YA manuscript has 3 alternating POVs, should each have their own paragraph in a query, or should it be condensed to give the overarching plot premise? I've seen this both ways. I think most often I see maybe not each having their own paragraph, but maybe each having a sentence as to establish like who they are in the story, and then maybe a paragraph on how they connect and what, you know, how the overarching plot connects them all. But I don't think you can go wrong there as long as I can tell why they're all in this story together. I think it's 3 paragraphs is getting a little long for a query though in the first place. So if you can condense to a paragraph about these different people who are showing up, and then, yeah, that would be better. If a picture book is more of a concept book and the plot is fairly slow, how could I interest an agent when I can't provide illustrations to help move the story? Concept books, you don't need to have illustrations. I represent just text. And I mean, a concept book doesn't necessarily have to have a super good plot. It just has to have a unique hook, meaning you know, a concept book can't be one that's already been done before, because why would you buy that one over the other one? I mean, you basically are dividing up your audience. So I think if you don't have, if it's a concept book that would rely heavily on illustrations in order to understand, you can add, like, you can either add a sentence at the beginning, you know, what the overall vision is for this, or sparingly using some art notes to help explain, you know, what would be shown per page if you can't understand from just the text. But you don't necessarily need to plot so much in concept books, so much as a unique angle approach to them. What type of stories do you think need to be written for the picture book category? What kinds of stories do you see too much of? What needs to be written? Gosh, I mean, just like I said before, we need to have it so that it's normal to see diversity on the shelves versus non-diversity. So I still think there are lots of stories waiting to be told, from many different perspectives. It should be normal to pick up any book and just have it be a diverse kind of a book. You shouldn't have to search for them. And what kinds of books do I see too much of? I think I see too many books that authors have rhymed when they don't know how to properly use rhyme and meter. I see too many books that are cute but not must-have, meaning they're kind of like, this is interesting, oh, that's a cute and funny kind of story, but once you read it once, am I really going to want to read it again once I know what the punchline of the joke is? So I think it has to offer something very special that I'm going to gravitate to, want reading over and over and over again. Right now, I'm looking for things that captivate me emotionally too. Are there tried and true ways to build emotional connections between characters and readers? Sure. So I think one of the best ways to build a connection to your reader with your characters is through voice. And voice is the quality that lets you forget that there's a writer and that there's only a character. It makes them feel real. It has a perspective, a sense of self in it. So a real voice, the best voices for me in a YA, or I shouldn't just say YA, in any kind of manuscript, are the ones that I will start thinking in their voice in my head. Even after I close the book of the page, meaning they're just so stands out and it's so unique, not gimmicky, unique. And it's such a clear voice. I think that if you could, when you really have captured a great voice, you can ask yourself, how would this character, if this character was confronted by X situation, you would know how they would react. Meaning they feel so fully realized that you could kind of say, throw a bunch of different situations at them and you would be able to think about how they would respond. I think that's honestly one of the best, I think that's the best way to build a connection to your characters, and making them real through voice. What are your thoughts on the word count for middle grade fantasy? So like I mentioned, 60,000 is typically the top end, but I've certainly seen them go higher. I think they can if it's a really, really, really good book, but don't go in planning on it. If there's a unique twist to a novel that's a big reveal, should the twist be included in the query to an agent or not? I don't think it has to be. I think that in a synopsis, yes, the twist has to be revealed. But I think in a query letter, the purpose isn't to tell me everything that happens. It's to get me wanting to read. So if you can intrigue me to say, ooh, what's going to happen, and need to turn to the pages, that's the job of the query letter. So you don't have to tell me everything in the query. Long question. Historical reimagining novel. Must the whole world be drastically different than history, or can the plot hinge on one detail from the past? Oh, I lost it. I lost it. I'm sorry. I lost that whole question. It was very long. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Or allowing one main character to be changed as opposed to all of society being changed. And if the changes, I lost it again. That's a really long question. Okay. Okay. Basically, I'm not sure I fully understand this question. It's so long, I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. Does a historical novel have to be accurate? I'm not sure if that was the question, but I think a part of the question was, does the whole society have to change versus just the character? No, I think just the character can change. You look at the Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. The whole society doesn't change, but the character sure does. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't understand fully the question. It was very long. Okay, let's go. How would you market a manuscript written in a new genre, something like Gulf Futurism, kitchen sink dystopia, jungle opera? Is the industry, oh, wait, can you pop that question back up? I was still imagining these different plots. Is the industry kind to unknown or new genres, or must we always be a familiarity with marketing new genres? I don't think that, to be perfectly honest, you can say whatever you want about your book in a query letter. I'm highly unlikely to be pitching it to editors as jungle opera. I'm going to be pitching it in the more like, this is a YA sci-fi or something, a dramatic YA dystopian or something like that, because when they're pitching it to bookstores and publishers are pitching to bookstores in return, they have specific categories that books need to fall under. So it should be able to at least go into one of these. It's very surprising if a book couldn't be categorized in some existing way. That said, I think the market's always changing and expanding, and anything can be done if it's done well. If you reject a query and the author then does a significant revision over a significant period of time, would you look at a new query for that manuscript? Would you want to know that context or not? Yes, I would want to know if I'd seen it before or not. Oftentimes I get plenty of queries and I recognize that I have seen them before. Don't think that agents don't. It's better to be upfront and say, I queried you with this and I made significant revisions, because then we're more likely to go in with a fresh eye. If I just feel like you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes and like saying like, hey, new query, and it's really not, and I'm just gonna be more likely to be like, no, I already saw this and it wasn't for me. So yes, add that context, and yes, it's always okay to re-query again through the proper query channels. Don't just, don't just surprise an agent in their inbox with something they didn't ask for. I love your end of the year querying statistics. Thanks. Have you gathered any other statistics on the publishing industry that you can share with us? I have not gathered any statistics. However, if you go to my resources section of my blog, down in the Ponder section, I offer several different statistics that everybody should be aware about in our in the publishing industry. So you should take a look at those. And unfortunately, no, I don't have any other statistics to share about anyone else. These are just my personal stats. Is it okay to hire sensitivity readers even after having an agent, especially for rep that's hard to find? It's always okay to hire sensitivity readers. I think that you should talk to your agent about your plan to do so. I can't really see why it wouldn't be okay to hire a sensitivity reader. I think it's wonderful to get different eyes and different perspectives. And I love that you said hire, because again, you should not expect it to be free. Yeah, I think just tell your agent what you want to do, and maybe your agent can help you strategize about who the best kind of, what the best kind of reads would be. Is my manuscript that is a chapter book is a subject matter and voice, but is 18K and for chapter book or lore. I don't do this right. Okay, so if it's 18,000 words, it's not a chapter book. It's probably a middle grade. However, it's very short for a middle grade. 18,000 words is basically kind of in nowhere land. A chapter book is for age ranges of 7 to 9 typically. And middle grade is for 8 to 12. So that's the difference here. And when you're talking upper middle grade, you're talking more the upper ages, meaning like 12. If you're lower middle grade, you're like 8 to 10. If you're a chapter book, if you're lower chapter book, it's more like 7. If you're upper chapter book, it might be 9, age 9. But in terms of word count, 18,000 kind of doesn't necessarily get you anywhere unless it's a novel in verse, which that could be a middle grade. I have not seen a chapter book in verse. That would probably be difficult for comprehension. Okay, I'm rambling now. I'll stop. I write picture books that have been called quiet. Do quiet picture books get picked up and sell? So I'll say this again. I think a quiet picture book can make a really large impact emotionally. So I think, yes, absolutely, quiet picture books sell. There's a whole picture book called The Quiet Book. I think it just depends on what you're offering to the reader outside of what the usual loud hook or concept would be. I think that I haven't read it, so I can't tell you for sure. But I think like there's The Rabbit Listened. That's one that's gotten a lot of attention recently. There's I'm blanking on lots of things, but yes, I think there's room for quiet picture books if they offer a very strong emotional impact. Or classroom tie-in or something like that. What do you find exciting in the nonfiction picture book market right now? What would you love to see more of? I'd like to see more wacky science. Science in general, I think, or math. I think I'm seeing in nonfiction, there's a lot of biographies. I'm looking for nonfiction that is outside of more just biographies and people, I guess, more like just wacky things and fun things that might appeal to kids in a non-didactic kind of way. What are your thoughts on unlikable protagonists in YA? Are agents less likely to take on these types of books? Well, it can be tough. I don't know that I have ever gone into a book not liking the protagonist. There are certainly books that you realize by the end something that makes you go, holy, and you suddenly everything comes into question and you were like, what? And you hate that person. Read Tiffany D. Jackson's novels if you're wondering what about specific books of mine that I might be thinking about. I think it's tough. I think that if you do an unlikable protagonist, you have to at least respect the person. I guess my favorite reference would be Cordelia and Buffy, the Vampire Slayer. She is the traditional popular girl who would be the traditional unliked character, but there's so many different layers to her. She's not an idiot. She has heart. You know, she has a lot of different things that make you actually care and respect her, even if she's not your favorite. So I think that just makes sure that your unlikable character is multifaceted and layered. How do you know if it's time to leave your agent? Well, I believe I have a post on my blog about this, but I think that, first of all, before you consider leaving your agent, I think that you should have an open conversation with your agent, assuming your agent is not a schmagent. Now, if you're, you know, red flags, it's time to leave your agent. You can't get a hold of your agent. Your agent has no sales whatsoever and has never worked in a publishing house before and does not work at an agency that also has sales, meaning complete nobody who's just like, I'm an agent. that's a red flag. You know, assuming you have yourself a legitimate literary agent, which means either someone who has been in the business and has reputable sales to all of the big 5 publishers, or works in an agency who does, meaning they have access to mentors who can help them do that. I would have a conversation with your agent because sometimes you may not have, basically it happens to me where I think everything's fine for my clients and it's because they haven't talked to me. You know, I'm not going to know what to do best for you if you don't tell me what you need. You know, I think that if you are unhappy with something specific and your agent is unable to meet those needs, then it's perfectly fine to part ways. I think that if you are getting to a point where you've been through many different manuscripts and your agent hasn't placed them, and you're not sure if the agent has the right vision for you moving forward, I think it's fine to have that conversation, but again, it should be a conversation. I think that if you are moving in a different direction than the agent represents, again, it should be a conversation. And I think that if you have sold books and maybe your agent isn't helping you make new career steps, meaning maybe your agent isn't helping you strategize how best to move forward, have a conversation about it first. Maybe that agent isn't a great fit longer term. That's a tough one. But again, key thing here, have a conversation with your agent. Be open and honest about what your concerns are first. I keep getting nudged to add agency right from page 1 to my sci-fi mans with an overly shy character. I'm wary of having to make my heroines overnight badasses every single time. Okay, that's a tricky one. I agree in that I don't think heroines need to be overnight badasses. However, I think that agency can come in voice, if not in action, meaning if your character is shy, do we at least feel like your character has a strong presence on the page to the reader, even if not to the others around her or him or her. That's really tough without seeing specifics, but basically, never like to say never, yes. Once you sign a client, do you have a hands-on editorial approach to get manuscripts ready for sub? Yes, I absolutely do. I think it's rare to find an agent these days who does not have an editorial approach. I go through several rounds of edits with my clients, and everywhere from big picture developmental, meaning we're working on just the basic plot outline, to in-depth line edits. So yeah, I do the bulk of it. What's the difference between historical fiction and historical reimagining? Okay. So I believe, believe historical fiction would be fact-based. Historical reimagining is reimagining what could be in a historical setting. So, for example, I forget which show it is that reimagines what the world would be like if Hitler had won. You know, that would be a historical and set in a historical time period. That would be historical reimagining versus historical fiction is someone living in the time period that Hitler lost. If that makes sense. When pitching new ideas, if you have an agent, how does the process work? And is a PowerPoint presentation okay to present them? Okay, is that from one of my clients? I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry. If you want to make yourself a PowerPoint, that's totally fine. But I think that that's a lot of. It seems like a lot of work. it's not necessary. When you have an agent and you want to pitch new ideas, I think all you really need is, well, one, you can just get on the phone if you want and just talk about it. Like, here's idea 1, here's idea 2, here's idea 3. Or you can email with a list of like short 1 to 2 sentence blurbs with the main like hook or concept. Here's all my ideas. Which one do you think is the best, most marketable? Or you can send your agent a Google Doc with blurbs, like full paragraphs, and then sample chapters, like where you're trying on the voice to see if they're connecting to voice or not. You could, I mean, basically there's no one way to do it. And sometimes you can just ask your agent, hey, what works best for you? If I send you an email with a bunch of paragraphs, or should I just send you a couple of sample chapters of new projects I'm working on, and you want to tell me which one's grabbing you? Agents work differently. So I work with all of them. Okay, when I'm ready, I can sign off. All right, well, thank you. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I hope I was able to answer everybody's questions sufficiently. And please do go take a look at my blog, adventuresinagentland.com. A lot of these questions are on subjects that I talked about a lot more in depth on my blog. And of course, I'm sure there are lots of resources through Right On Con as well. All right, thank you, everybody. Bye.